Hi, this is John Van Lunen, and you are listening to Treasures of the Outer Banks. In this podcast, we talk to people who live on the Outer Banks, and through their stories, we'll explore what makes this place so special. So if you downloaded this podcast to find out where the gold is hidden, my apologies. But if you want to meet the people we treasure on this sandbar, stick around. I'm sure you'll enjoy their stories of history, local personalities, and community.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is John Van Lunen, and you are listening to Treasures of the Outer Banks. In this latest episode, I talked to a good friend of mine, 82-year-old Wikey Wise. This is pure gold, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Wykie and I go back. I used to be a Hobie Cat dealer, and he is an avid sailor, still loves to sail. That's all he thinks about, I think. And as a Hobie dealer, he would always stop by the shop, and he would just chat, and he was always just so warm and friendly. And over time, he would just share some little stories. And when I decided to create a podcast, I started putting a list together of people that I thought would be interesting. And he was right there at the top of the list because I knew some of his stuff was great. He's going to tell you his stories about growing up as a kid here, living in Corolla back in the 50s, his grandparents in Nags Head Woods. It's all great. Wykie is a little hard of hearing, so because of that, I tend to repeat some of the questions, and sometimes I kind of have a tendency to yell into the mic so he can hear me. We did this face-to-face, but we did it socially distant, and because we were across the room from each other, it was sometimes hard for him to hear me. We jump right in at the beginning of this episode. Some of the information I thought was a little drawn out, maybe a little dried. I didn't want to lose your attention. And also, to be honest, I did make a few little mistakes with the editing, but I think you still catch the gist of it. It's still amazing that he can trace back his family line so far, and we go on from there. I think you're going to enjoy this episode, so sit back and relax.
And somewhere along the line, there was another John Wise. They called him Johann, from the German origination. And he is the one that I've been following closely. He married a girl named Mary Sneed, and Sneed was a name that was popular. Well, Sneed's Ferry.
Yep.
At Sneed's Ferry.
Yeah, I was going to say Sneed's Ferry.
North Carolina. And they also came from Accomack. There's Sneed's family in Accomack. And they probably knew each other or the family knew each other, and that's why they went down that way.
Right.
And from there, he moved to Bath. No, not Bath necessarily, Pamlico County. Not Pamlico, doggone it, what's the name of the county where Bath is?
I know what you're talking about. So Bath is an interesting place because they believe Blackbeard hung out in there.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it.
I delivered a Hobie Cat to Bath, and we were right on the river. I don't know the river, and a dolphin swims right by. I mean, we're inland quite a ways, and fish are popping all over the place. I'm like, this place is kind of cool. It's a real sleepy town right now, but I guess it was kind of a county seat per se back in the day, back when maritime.
Carolina governor stayed there for a while, or
is that right?
Was the upper person to do it when they were colonists.
Right.
And they picked the Pamlico County as the one Pamlico River is the one you're talking about.
Okay.
Because it was for a sailing ship, if they could get in Ocracoke, it was a reach, 90 degrees to the wind, going up
a beam
river
reach
and coming back down the river to the inlet, rather than using the noose, which had a stronger current and positioned wrong. They couldn't sail one direction in the noose.
Right.
So that's my idea on it anyway.
Yeah, and I heard Blackbeard liked it because I guess you could kind of hide in there and poke his nose out into the sound, the open waters, so to speak, and if you saw something he liked, he could go after it.
Yeah. They kept a watch.
Yeah.
I understand they did anyway. Kept a watch, and he'd go get them.
Yep. So your ancestors migrated from Bath, and then eventually they wound up in Stumpy Point, right?
Eventually, this Johann settled over there in the same county as Bath.
Okay.
Probably in Washington, I don't know.
Right.
And from there, he went to Stumpy Point. Now, I don't know of any Wises being in Stumpy Point before he went there. I have no idea why he went.
Right.
But he went there. He was an older man then, and he had not old. He died right after that anyway.
Okay.
And he had the boy with him, which was Samuel Spencer Wise, and he was 4 years old in 1790 when I picked up on him in Stumpy Point. And he grew up there, married a midget. I can't think what these names are. I'm bad about that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I know him.
I hope I'm not confusing.
He's buried down in Stumpy Point. I've been down to his grave.
Is that right?
And Sarah Allen Mann. I believe she was a man.
Okay. As in Mann's Harbor?
Sarah Alice Mann, I believe. Anyway, Sarah Mann married her. And they had a whole slew of kids in Papa. I think it was from them, so far as I can understand. Everybody from Stumpy Point was originated from that family of Samuel Spencer Wise's children.
Wow.
And there were a few. One of them was Jackie Midget Wise, was his son, in my line. And from there was Joseph Wise, and then my grandfather, John Wise.
I can't believe you remember all these names. That's just amazing.
I'm not doing too good at it.
I get to my grandparents and I stop pretty much there, right about there. So you're doing real good. And your grandfather and grandmother were born, grandfather born in 1881?
Yes.
Amazing. And your grandmother, 1887?
86, I believe.
1886, got it. And they had how many kids?
11.
Wow. Good-looking girls?
That's what the Manio boys said.
That's what the Manio boys said. It's got to be true then.
Yeah, that's what I hear stories over there about them coming over to Nags Head visiting those Wise girls.
Right. So this is kind of interesting. So when you grew up around here, and people find out your last name is Wise, all of a sudden they just start talking like, oh yeah, we know some Wises, and you're probably all related, right?
No, the Wises had mostly girls.
Oh, okay, so they dropped the name.
Yeah, my grandfather had seven girls and 4 boys, and
Gotcha.
2 of those got killed. Well, my father was one of them, and so one of them didn't have any kids.
Right.
And it's been downhill. Even back in England, from his family that was in there around Devon, around the town there, the harbor. They have in the harbor of Plymouth. It's out near Cornwall anyway, right on the border of Cornwall and Devon. They have a hill there that's called Wise Mound, where they had their ships and stuff like that going out. They were in shipping a lot. And what was I saying?
We were talking about the Wises and how the name is so common around here.
They all died off.
Over in England as well.
There's nobody there in Devon any longer.
Crazy.
Named Wise, from what I've read.
Huh.
I've heard that from several sources, reading stuff from England.
Wow. So your grandparents lived in Nags Head Woods. I don't know when they migrated from Stumpy Point over to Nags Head Woods, but your grandparents pretty much lived in Nags Head Woods.
Yeah, my grandmother was from Nags Head Woods. And, she was born on the side I call it the side of Jockeys Ridge. It's where the sand had come in and wooded over a little bit, and they had houses built in there. Not just them, not just my grandmother's parents, but other people too had houses built in there, in that same area, right at the edge of the woods. And the woods became inundated there by the hill again. It started blowing in, and his house was probably one of the last ones, because he was known as by the man that lived on the hill.
Yeah.
So in Nags Head Woods.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so they didn't have electricity, right?
Oh no, they didn't have anything.
Jeez, and they had to pump their own water.
He had a tank there alongside the house, and one pump on the porch for grandmother to use doing her washing, and one in the kitchen for her to do for cooking, and she had a great big wood stove in there. You wouldn't believe it how big that thing was for cooking.
And so when you say pump, was that to pump out of a cistern, or was that to pump out of a well?
Oh, that was a pump out of the well. I guess it must have been out of the ground. He must have had a well down there with a hand pump.
I would believe it. I was just making sure. That's all.
Because the only thing they had hooked to the tank that I can remember was a spigot.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Never thought about it.
Tell me about the how your grandma used to do laundry.
How
you just told me a few minutes ago how she used to do laundry.
Oh, yeah, she had a Maytag washing machine, one of the first ones that came out, and with a gasoline engine on it.
That's great.
And a Kickstarter.
Nice.
And she'd go out and kickstart that thing to do her laundry.
Just like a motorcycle.
And like a motorcycle, but and then of course everything else was done by hand, the wringing and the.
Is that right?
Drying it on a line and all this kind of stuff.
Tell me where this washing machine was located.
Where it was located?
Yeah.
On the porch.
Was it in Nags Head Woods?
Yeah, in Nags Head Woods, they had a porch all the way around the house.
Okay.
And she had it on one corner was set up for her washing.
And it was just left outside?
It was left outside.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And, but so tell me about how, you just told me a story about hiking over to historical row. What is it? Nags Head Row? The story you just told me about doing laundry or getting water down.
Oh, she was carrying her laundry back one time. She took in laundry for the people over here on the beach, the planters that had a cottage that they stayed in a couple of months in the summer. And she would take in the laundry there and go over and get it, walk over and get it from Nags Head Woods.
Okay.
Carry it back and fold it up in two sheets, or not folded, just dumped in two sheets, in a bundle. Oh, a huge bundle.
Yeah.
One over each shoulder.
Yeah. Imagine taking all your laundry and throwing it into a bed sheet. That's what you had.
And I was going to walk along with her one time. Of course, I didn't carry any laundry. I was about 5 years old, but I walked along with her. And I wanted to go up on Jockeys Ridge. And she said no. She couldn't go up there carrying this load,
Right.
Well, I kept after her, and finally she said, look, I'm not going to go up there with this clean laundry that I'm carrying back to them right now, but when I get the dirty laundry, we'll walk up on Jockeys Ridge.
Yeah.
I said, okay, that satisfied me. On the way back, she was carrying the dirty laundry. The wind had picked up, it was blowing pretty good, and had the sand just blowing off the top of the hill, the top of the ridge, just as hard as it could go. It'd sting your feet when you try to walk up there.
Right.
She walked me up there.
That's a tough woman.
All the way, it was on the western side, so on the sound side.
Yeah.
And we walked up there, had a good time. She was happy. She was always smiling. She never got upset about anything.
Yeah.
And back on down the shore. And
just lugging laundry.
I got to be up on Jockeys Ridge. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh my gosh. So let's see, living in Nags Head Woods, your granddad would raise hogs and stuff in the woods?
I don't know what he raised up there. I know they had chickens. When I came along, about all they had up there was chickens. And I understand before then that they had other larger animals, but I'm not sure of what kind they had. But he did grow some pigs when they moved over to the beach. He had those out in back of the house, three hogs, and he grew them. And then it came time to butcher them. He found out that he had become so attached to those hogs that he couldn't stand to see those things butchered.
Yeah.
So he left. He wasn't there for the killing or the butchering or anything that I saw. I didn't see him. He had somebody else do it.
Right.
He thought of one of us pigs there he liked so much he named her Judy Canova. And Judy Canova was a popular celebrity back in that time.
Yeah.
Not supposed to have been a very good-looking person.
Not a very good-looking person?
But that was the name of his hog.
Good thing Judy didn't hear about that.
And when they butchered them, they had everybody around family, and probably some that weren't the family, I don't know, that was in there, sitting out in the sandhill, cleaning these, cutting these, butchering these hogs, cutting them up finer, how they were going to be using them.
So it was kind of a community ritual to just everybody help out?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember distinctly Granddaddy's sister sitting on a stool with a bucket of water between her legs, and she's pulling these intestines through it,
Yeah.
cleaning it out and squeezing it and running her hand down to squeeze everything out. I was thinking, what in the world is she doing with them? I didn't know they used those for making sausage.
How was that sausage?
Yeah, they may use.
Was it good sausage?
Well, I'd eaten a lot of sausage before I made the connection.
Now you don't want to eat sausage, do you?
I eat patty sausage now.
Patty sausage. I'll remember that one. That's too good. Driving in the woods. What was it like trying to drive a car through Nags Head Woods back then?
Well, it seemed like the natural thing to do, really.
Yeah.
It was all sand. Everything was sand, and it wasn't any worse going through the woods, except for the hills. Some of those were steep. There's turns in there that you can look down and see down it. Yeah, it looks like it's 50 feet. It's probably 20.
Yeah.
But it's a long ways down.
Still going to hurt when you fall down there.
Yeah, my grandfather didn't like a car. He didn't want one. He refused to buy one. But
Yeah.
the family kept after him for years and years to get a car. So he went up to Virginia Beach and brought it back down the beach. That was the only way to get here then. There was no roads, no bridges. Couldn't get anywhere but boat.
Right.
He drove it down the beach, and when he went through Nags Head Woods, lack of experience, I think, he ran off the road like that hill.
Right.
And it went down in the valley. He got out of it, went home, refused to go back and get the car. And it was still there. I think it was still there when I was young.
Yeah.
I was told that was the car. Anyway, there was not much left but an engine block sitting there. You might have saw some chassis parts.
Yeah.
Halfway covered up with leaves, but I think most of the body had rusted away by then.
That's funny. So the man who wouldn't spend a nickel on anything just decided to throw away.
No, he kept everything, and he had a box of tools that he kept out on the porch, a very small box of carpenter tools, and everything he built with those tools.
Wow.
One thing I didn't tell you is that when my uncle came back down from New York, retired from the Coast Guard in '46, and started building a house over on the Sound Shore. My granddaddy helped him build it, and they were up on the scaffolding one hot summer day trying to rip a piece of lumber. It must have been a 16-foot length. It was long.
Yeah.
And they were taking turns with a rip saw, with a hand saw.
Wow.
And sweating. And off in the distance, I kept hearing this noise, a skill saw going.
Yeah.
And they just look at each other and pick up the saw and keep on sawing. And finally they said, well, at a time like this, Granddaddy said, it may not be too bad to own a saw like that.
Lesson learned.
They were working hard at that.
So here's a question for you. I hear that they did some farming up there, but it sounded like they planted some stuff up in the woods as well. Does this ring a bell at all?
Yes, Tillett had a farm.
And so would they just cut down the trees and open up a little area? And
yes,
okay.
That's what it appears.
Was it kind of flat, or was it always kind of like on the side of a hill or something?
No, it was pretty well flat because I believe the first Tillett that went up there started the farm. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it was inherited by many of the sons.
Okay.
And as I remember seeing it, it was pretty much flat right in that area.
Yeah.
And it had been farmed for quite some time, and they had built a house back there that I have seen it, but I've never been to it when it was standing. It's burned down now.
Right.
And
I guess, I have done a lot of hiking in the woods there, and there are some flat areas. I could see you having a little, little plot.
There was a flat area down the hill from my granddaddy's house. And that's where there was an old man when I was young that farmed there, a small garden. Well, a large garden, we'll put it. It wasn't a farm for making money, I don't believe. He just grew his vegetables there.
Right.
Real old man. Grandmother told him that he was, I don't know, 90 years old or something. She said his secret to being able to work like that is to start out slow and just grubbing the ground, and after a while he'd get it all done and get his planting done and rest a lot. He said he did a lot of work.
That's
without
amazing.
any power tools or anything.
Yeah.
No mule for harvesting anything.
Wow.
We called him Uncle Jewel.
Okay, that was the Uncle
Yeah,
Jewel.
he said
Okay.
he's not your uncle. He's not really any
Right.
relative to us. He's just a man that stayed here. That his family was from up in Norfolk and Elizabeth City, and he was here with his parents, and they left, and he just stayed on.
Is that right? So since we're on Uncle Jewel, let's go ahead and talk about his parents' hotel. Uncle Jewel's parents' hotel. They built the big hotel, right?
Yeah, he was a Russell, and the Russells were the first ones that built the Nags Head Hotel. That was going strong in 1850.
Wow. And where were they from?
They were from Norfolk.
Okay.
And I think they had some holdings in Elizabeth City.
Okay. And how big do you think this hotel was, if you could guess?
How big was the hotel? The picture I've seen of it, it was huge. It was 3 stories high.
Wow.
And
1850. Wow.
1850s. So there must have been a good business going on in tourist trade for quite some time before 1850.
Yeah, you wouldn't build a big hotel unless you had tourists.
And I read the other day that they had remodeled it in 1850. This is the advertisement that I've seen.
Yeah.
It's been freshly renovated.
Yeah.
So it must have been there for quite some time in 1850 for them to do that.
And you say it was equal to or associated with, proximity-wise, the big Soundside Pier where the steamers would come in, correct?
Everything that I read on the subject, it was in the middle between the ocean and the Sound.
Okay.
And the pier was built on their property.
Okay.
And they're the ones that, not necessarily the Russells that built it, but somebody along the line that owned that hotel built the track or the roadway going over to the beach. Well, it was first from the steamer that came in, and a cart to carry the cargo over to the hotel. Then they extended it on the other side of the hotel to the ocean to take the people over for bathing.
It was how would you describe this? A cart? Like a railroad kind of cart without...
It was a mule-driven cart, and a guy named Peterson, well, no, he didn't necessarily run that cart. A guy named Peterson carried the people around, and I understand he carried them from the hotel over to the beach.
They would just sit in a cart, he would pull it over with a mule or something?
Yeah, he
Gotcha.
had oh gosh, I forgot what the name of his mule, I believe it was. But I've even seen the name of his mule.
Again, you amaze me that you know these names.
It was important. The name of the mule was important to people like that.
Right.
Just like if you talk to people from Wykie or in the fishing industry,
Yeah.
they won't talk about anybody without mentioning the name of their boat.
Is that right?
It comes up.
Gotta mention the boat. That way there's an association.
Yeah, they name the boats that they've got and had and everything else.
That's amazing. So I'm trying to picture this. And so just to give a little history, the steamers were coming mostly from Elizabeth City, but other towns along up inland a little bit on the water.
Well, they came all the way down from Elizabeth City. This is at one period of time.
Yeah.
The people from Norfolk that were coming in as tourists would take a stagecoach from Norfolk down to Elizabeth City. Elizabeth City, they'd get on a steamer.
Wow.
And there was one that ran to the hotel and over at Mandio. And there was another one that was a larger steamer. Evidently, it couldn't get into Nags Head. They went to the west side of the Wanchees Road,
Okay.
the middle of Roanoke Island, and Skyco.
Skyco, yeah.
And
I guess it sounds like that was kind of a popular stopping point.
Yeah, that was at one time. And then they'd go on down to further on down the Sound.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But before we move on, just the hotel, the big hotel,
Yeah.
and we don't know the name of that hotel right now, do we?
The Nags Head Hotel.
It was called Nags Head Hotel. Okay. You seem to think or believe that it was located near the current Nags Head post office. Is that right?
Well, it was located between the ocean and the Sound. There was another building. I don't know how large it was on the Sound at the foot of the pier.
Okay.
No, I take that back. Well, that's right. It didn't belong to the. It didn't belong to the hotel. Hollowell built one.
Okay.
Right at the near the foot of the pier, and he had a 2-story hotel. It was quite large too. The post office was in that.
Okay.
Before Hollowell built that store and had the post office there, there was a small post office, a little cabin type thing built with the name of Griffin, and the mail was then sent to, instead of Nags Head, sent to Griffin.
Yeah.
So far as some people are concerned, it wasn't Nags Head any longer, it was Griffin. But,
I wonder who Griffin was.
yeah, he was the man that run the post office.
Okay.
I don't know who he was or where he came from, but
Funny.
I did hear something about his wife, but I can't remember what that was now. There's something, wasn't too much interested in the Griffins at that time.
Okay. So tomorrow is March 1, 2021. We are on the downside of a pandemic. I say downside because infections, deaths are going down, infections are going down. We have a vaccine. We're hopefully we're rebounding back. And you seem to know information about the 1918 flu because your grandfather and his family survived it.
Yes, they were up in Hampton Roads area. He was up there working, and he stayed right in there during the flu going on until they started carrying bodies by on a
That's
cart.
crazy. So he saw it,
On a cart. He got his family that he had with him in his boat and came back down the Sound as quick as he could.
And stop right there because we talked about this just a few minutes ago. Your grandfather, the same guy who discarded the Model T after one day, did all of his commuting by boat. And he would work in Hampton Roads, and he would spend a week or two up there, right? Or more?
Oh, I don't know how long he was up there. I never found out.
But he would go, he would stay there extended periods of time.
Yes.
But he always took a boat back. Because cars just were not, not everybody had a car back then, and it was hard to navigate around all the water without a boat. But he'd take a boat. You're telling me you're all the way up to Hampton Roads for work.
Yeah, so I'd never heard of a car being down here before 1921.
Is that right?
Yeah. I
Wow.
don't know whether that's true because there's a lot of people claim to have seen the first car.
So I'm sorry I interrupted you, but go ahead and tell. So he's seeing the bodies pile up. He's got family there working as well, correct?
He's got what?
His family. He has family members with him up there working?
He had some of the family with him.
Yep.
Some of the older girls, I think, he had with him.
Gotcha. So go from there.
Because they were all sick. I don't know how many there were, but they were all sick, and they were sleeping wherever they could.
Yeah.
Granddaddy got sick also, where he couldn't run the boat. Left grandmother to do it.
Yeah.
And she had the flu also.
Oh my.
But
Grandmothers are tough.
she didn't. Grandmother never gave up on anything.
Yeah.
She kept on going, and she run the boat back. Supposedly, this is what I've heard. And they got out. They got to the house,
In Nags
and they
Head Woods.
quarantined themselves.
And quarantine themselves. Wow.
And the neighbors would bring them food, set it on the porch,
Right.
and when the neighbors would leave, they'd come out and get their food, and kept them alive like that until they got over the flu.
Wow.
That's,
and nobody
that's
died.
the way people worked. Yeah.
Yeah.
They all seem to help everybody out in every situation.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. I've read about that. It's just great. All right, so that's kind of the Nags Head Woods chapter, and it's fascinating. You kind of come along. You're born in New York, and you live up there with relatives, and then you finally come down here. How old are you when you finally,
7 years old when we came back.
7 years old, and you moved into the sound side of Nags Head?
Well, first we lived at cleaned out my grandmother's kitchen, which she had brought down from Nags Head Woods, and fixed it up and stayed in it for a winter that I can remember. Two winters, I believe. And in the meantime, he was building the house over on Soundside Road.
Who is he?
My uncle. I live with my uncle.
Yeah.
And aunt.
Yeah.
My father's sister. And it took a good while to get the house built. And he got that done, and then we moved over there.
Okay.
And that was in 47, I guess. He came up in 46. I guess we moved over there in about 1947.
Okay, before we go further, I want you to share that story you told me about your dad meeting this nice lady in New York, and they move into a house in Nags Head Woods.
Oh,
this is
when
great.
He met my mother in New York.
Yeah.
I don't know when they got married. I never did find that out, but I was born in 39, February, so they must have got married in 1938. And I was still a baby. They came to Nags Head. He was just like me. When he marries a girl up, I married one in West Palm Beach, and I didn't lose any time getting up to Nags Head with her. And he brought her up to the woods. Well, she was straight from New York City.
Yeah.
And she was used to the life there, which
Electricity?
somebody else can describe that better than I can. But
Electricity, indoor plumbing?
yeah, to a house that had a little cabin beside my grandmother and grandfather's house is where they stayed.
Yeah.
Uncle Joel's house. He had since died, and
Okay.
they were staying there. And there had no water, no running water,
Right.
no electricity, no inside toilet. It was all outside toilet.
Right.
And there was nothing, absolutely nothing in Nags Head Woods to do
Right.
if you weren't interested in Nags Head, and she wasn't. She didn't care about the Sound Shore, going crabbing like everybody else did,
Right.
picking up soft crabs, and she didn't care to go over to the beach, which none of us went to the beach anyway for anything really. We didn't spend much time on the beach like they do nowadays.
Right.
And she just would not stay. So she went back to New York. That's when my mother and father separated.
Gotcha.
And I separated.
I just found it funny, just.
Oh, yeah, that you bring a young girl.
Welcome home.
She was but 19 years old, and she was used to the nightlife and everything else that they have up there in New York City, and she came down here, and there was nothing.
Your dad must have been a serious talker to talk her into that, but obviously she didn't buy it
Smooth
in
talker,
the end.
I guess. I don't know. I don't know him.
So you spend your first couple years in Nags Head, and then you head up to you relocate to Corolla. First of all, why did you relocate to Corolla?
Why?
Yeah.
My uncle liked to work, and he felt that was his life. And he got a job up there as a guide and caretaker for the place, for the club, for the Whalehead Club.
Wow, he was a caretaker for the Whalehead.
Yeah, he was one of 5 guys I think they had up there.
Wow.
3 that I know. I think they had more.
So did you live right near the Whalehead Club?
Yes, we lived in Penny's Hill Coast Guard Station when I first went up. That was Mr. Adams, the man that run the club at the time, had bought the Penny's Hill Coast Guard Station when it was closed up by the Coast Guard, and brought it down to his club and set it up right near the boathouse, and that's where we lived. Was there, in that it had my room was the barracks for the big room for all the crew.
Were you sleeping with the crew?
No, wasn't any crew around, just me.
You were the crew.
Just me right there by the lookout tower where I could run up there if I wanted to and
Is
take
that right?
see around. And
Wow, that's cool.
my aunt and uncle picked the captain's quarters,
Yeah.
or the caretaker, or whatever they called him at the life-saving station.
And there probably weren't a whole lot of structures up in Corolla back then, were there? Like buildings?
Buildings? Yeah, there were quite a few.
Yeah?
I mean, for a little village, it was a little village, but it had been pretty much abandoned. There was a lot of abandoned houses.
Oh, okay.
And one-room school,
Right.
and a post office with a little snack bar. Well, not snack bar, but snacks,
Yeah.
prepared. And the school, which I remember the most, was one room, and they had added an addition before when the place was a little bit busier back in the 30s. They had added another room on the school, which was where they fed the kids, had prepare lunches for them.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of kids go in there then. There must have been 20.
Woo!
At that time, when I went to school there was anywhere from 7 to about 13.
Wow.
And all the grades, 1 through 12.
Wow.
And
Did you teach the kids younger than you, or? Because sometimes when you get into a single, classroom school, they'll let the older kids teach the younger
yes,
kids.
well, if you go back and visit today, it looks exactly like it did.
Is that right?
When I went to school there, I was up and visiting it, and they asked me to ring the bell. They wanted to take my picture while I was ringing the bell.
Is that right?
And I said, well, I'll try. But when I went to school there, the bell, if you pulled hard on it, it would turn upside down, and somebody had to climb up on the roof and turn it over. So I was very careful about pulling
You didn't want to
it,
get in trouble?
and I wasn't making a very good show of it, but they got my picture.
That's awesome.
Anyway. And I explained to them. They said, oh, no, you can pull it as hard as you want to now. It's evidently been fixed or changed the bell or something.
Right. That's funny. So tell me about, as a kid, what did you do up in Corolla?
I walked when I wasn't in school. I enjoyed walking.
Yeah.
And I'd walk the beach mostly, and the hills between there and the Sound. The Sound side was kind of built up, wooded area, I should say, not built up houses, but wooded, and had a little path that would go down. One place we had one spot where a path led down to the water. I'd go down there sometimes, but mostly I'd walk on the beach.
Yeah. Is this about the time you started finding World War II remnants?
Started finding everything that would wash up on the beach. It was coming out of the ships that were falling apart.
Right. The ships that were typically the victims of Germany and Nazis bombing those ships.
Ships that were sub-sunken, most of them,
Yeah.
I believe. At the very beginning of the war, they were over here with their subs. Just all we were doing was sending transport ships, freighters.
Yeah.
Because we were supplying England with a lot of their material.
Right.
That they needed, their arms and their ammunition and their food too, probably. I don't know.
Yep.
So
And this is after the war, but you're still finding stuff.
After the war until 1951, I found K rations or C rations, whatever they were called.
Yeah.
In the cans, and the food was still good in them. In 50, well,
How do you
it
know
was
this?
a little bad on them about 51.
It's a C ration. It can only be so good, right? But the fact that you found them and tried them is a great story.
Yeah.
What else did you find?
I found a lot of canteens that would wash up.
Wow.
I always used those. And, my Hughes Jr., my cousin, and I each had a canteen. We'd fill up with soda drinks, Pepsis and Royal Crown Cola,
Yeah.
and such as that, to carry around with us when we woke up in Nags Head Woods, because we'd go up there a lot too when I was down at the beach, when I was at Nags Head.
Right.
And I'd walk to the next Coast Guard station, which was about 6 miles. When I get out of school, I'd go down there, and it would be getting dark by the time I got there. And I was going to catch a ride a lot of times. So I'd walk down to catch a ride back with my aunt and uncle who were in Nags Head. And when they came back, I'd ride with them. And it was after dark before they came. I'd continue on walking sometimes
Yeah.
on down toward Caffer's Inlet.
Wow, that's a long walk.
And that would be another 6 miles. But
Yeah.
I'd go about halfway, and there was a place about halfway where they could either drive from there to Caffer's Inlet. They could either drive on the Pole Road, which was over across the hills, or on the beach.
Yeah.
And the beach wasn't usually good, but sometimes they would come. But on the Pole Road, I could see the headlights bouncing, so I'd go that way.
Yeah.
And if I saw the lights bouncing, I'd cross over the sand hills, get up to the Pole Road, and they'd pick me up. I never did miss them the whole time, but I would have had to walk over 6 miles back home in the middle of the night if I missed them.
Yeah.
And it was.
So where was that other? So you're saying there was one Coast Guard station up by the lighthouse, and you say there's another one about 6 miles south?
There was what, Coast Guard stations?
Yeah.
They were spaced about 6 miles apart all
Okay.
along the beach. I was told they were 6 miles apart, but
Okay.
I've looked, and it varies a little bit,
Yeah.
depending on where they really need them. They were all, which I didn't mention, they're all named after some geographical feature. A sand hill,
Okay.
Kill Devil Hills, was named after Kill
Gotcha.
Devil Hills, Sand Hill.
And that way you could spot them and figure it out easily
Yeah,
which one was which.
Yeah.
Okay.
except
So-
the hills are gone now.
Yeah.
Some of them are.
Yeah. So since we're on that topic of you walking down around Caffey's Inlet and stuff, you got to tell me the story about almost getting bombed in the duck bombing range.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Now, we would drive back to Nags Head from Corolla when we stayed up there quite frequently. Well, both ways. But the Navy was used that as a shooting range, and they'd have their targets set up from the Sound over to the ocean.
Right.
So the planes would come in over the Sound, follow a line of targets in, and then start shooting when they got right over the Sound shore. The road from Corolla ran just north of Duck, ran right through the bombing range where the planes approached, and on the Sound shore.
Yeah.
And that's the way we came. They usually came in by groups of 5 planes.
Right.
And when the 5 of them, we'd count them, and when 5 of them went by, we'd watch them. They'd go back over the ocean and start swinging around, and by then we'd be across the bombing range and over on the other side of it.
Right.
And they'd come around, and you'd hear them firing behind us when we after we made it through. Well, one day we counted out 5 airplanes in a group going by, and there was a space no more. We took off. Just as we took off, there were 5 more behind that group of 5.
Uh-oh.
And they held their fire until they got right over top of us, and they let go. And they were firing machine guns, I believe, is what they had, 50 caliber machine guns in the wings. And the car was loaded with women. It was my Aunt Agnes was driving, and there were 5 women, I believe, in the car. 4 women and my aunt and me stuffed in the back seat.
Yeah.
And they were hollering and screaming, and my aunt sunk down in the seat where she could hardly see where she was going, and she floored that car and going through the soft sand, the banks, the rut in the road.
Yeah.
So it was sweeping from one side of the road of the road to the other, but we made it through.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting there fat, dumb, and happy because they were firing right over top of my head. I knew they weren't going to hit me.
Oh my goodness. And this wasn't, like your brand new suburban 4-wheel drive vehicle.
No, it's 46 Chevrolet.
46 Chevrolet.
Yeah.
Just piled to the gunnel with people.
Yeah, they knew how to drive in the sand. My uncle did especially. He was good. He could really handle one in the sand.
Did they have to air down all the time, or they just always?
Oh yeah, let her down. Usually we let them down to 16. Nowadays with the radial tires, they don't go below 18, but
Gotcha.
we let them down to about 16 then, and then drive slow on the highway.
Yeah.
Or we'd actually go through more shore Road, which is closed now.
Oh, yeah.
It's
That's in
called
Kitty Hawk.
Bay Drive now in Kitty Hawk. We'd go through Duck Woods, which is a wooded area with areas where you could go to the Sound, good soft crabbing along the Sound.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that. So it's at some point, and you were pretty young, maybe 10, when you went crabbing. Was it back in the 40s? You were pretty young. So you'd go, tell me about that, crabbing and duck.
Well, I was 10 or 11 at that time.
Yeah.
And my aunt grew up crabbing on the Sound Shore, and she knew how to catch a crab.
Yeah.
And she'd park the car. She was driving then. She didn't let me drive until I was 10. She was driving the car, and she'd stop along there and go down the shore, pick up the crabs. I'd go along with her, bring them back to the car. She would catch them, and catch them by the dozens. I mean, I'd carry back several dozens every trip. Back, get down to her again. She'd have another dozen or two.
Wow.
And I'd pack them in little boxes that were cardboard boxes that looked like beer crates back then. I don't know where she got them, but they'd hold about 24 beers. So we'd get two rows of crabs in them, packed in with the seaweed to keep them from drying out, and keep them damp. Yeah. Put them in the trunk of the car. I have the trunk loaded with soft crabs from just her catching them. I couldn't see. I didn't know it, but I was about half blind at that time.
Is that right?
And I couldn't see my hand in front of my face hardly. And pack them in there, and then she'd run on down the beach road when we get up home, get up to Kitty Hawk. Yep. And she knew the places to go there, the hotels to go to, and I'd carry them in, and the people would buy them there. They'd get 2 or 3 dozen at a time, you know. Yeah. And then by the time we got to the Sound side, they were all sold. We have enough for ourselves.
Is that right?
That was it.
And you had money in your pocket.
Yeah, put money in her pocket.
She made you do the work of getting into the kitchen, but she took the money.
She did the important work.
Yeah, she did the heavy lifting.
I never soft crab like she could. Yeah. I had a cousin too that come down to Rodanthe when I was renting sailboats down there, and she said, "Do you catch any soft crabs down here?" And I told her best I knew how where to go to catch soft crabs. She says, "I think I'll go the other way."
Buy them?
And she would come back with soft crabs, a whole bunch of them.
Oh, yeah.
And I had no idea there was any soft crabs up that way that she went. Huh. She found them.
That's amazing. That's kind of that's mostly your Corolla experience. And then after about 3 years, 2 or 3 years, you moved back down to Nags Head, correct?
Yeah, I was up there about, when I was 9 and 10, 11, and when I turned 12, we left. Right. And I went back to Nags Head.
To the same house that your uncle built before?
The house that my uncle built. And moved back into that. And I stayed there until I graduated from school in 1956.
Was it hard transitioning? So you went to the single-room school in Corolla, and then you went to school in Manteo. Was it hard transitioning to the Manteo school at all?
Well, I didn't get much of an education, but it was easy. I was so far behind everybody else, it was pitiful.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I never did get caught up going through school, except maybe in math. I got where I could do arithmetic, I should say. Right. I got where I could handle that.
Right. So you're living down here, and at some point, and I apologize if I'm not keeping things in a chronological pattern, but at some point you work at the casino.
That was when we came back to Nags Head. Let's see, I guess I had to have been 16 when I started the casino because they served beer, but I worked in the bowling alley, taking care of collecting the money and making sure everybody kept records of their bowling because we had to trust them to keep their score so we could tell how much to charge them. Yeah. And I did that for 2 or 3 years in the summer. 2, I think it was. And we lived right beside the casino.
Okay.
at that time. And my uncle was running a service station there. He bought the business and had to do something. He was running that service station. And
Next to the casino?
And, they get, I don't know whether I told you or not, but they get to play in the bunny hop was real popular there
Okay.
at one time, and everybody jumping in unison up on the dance floor, on the upstairs floor.
Yeah.
And the post holding the floor would start bouncing. The bowling alleys would bounce up and down. You had to close up some of the alleys while they were while they were dancing upstairs.
So, just to pause for a second, I learned about the casino only about 15 years ago. I couldn't believe that there was a casino down here way back in the day. So it kind of fascinates my imagination. But from what I gather, it was a 2-story wooden structure. Basically, well, where Kitty Hawk Heights is located right now, more or less.
Yeah, John Harris ended up buying the property. Matter of fact, John Harris got his start right there in the 70s, working out back of the casino.
Right. So this was, from what I gather, it faded away as time went on and big bands stopped traveling and stuff like that. But for a while there, it was like the magnet on the outer.
It was the place to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was about the only place to go. They had others now that I never did go to. They had some smaller places, and then later on, in the late 50s, early 60s, something like that, there'd be other places opened up further on to the north. The recreation center became popular.
Yeah.
In the late 50s, and a lot of cars. There was so much traffic you couldn't travel on the beach road at 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You couldn't do 10 on it.
So describe your memory of the casino back when you were working there.
Well, the casino, I guess everybody's seen pictures of it on the outside.
Yeah.
And on the inside, it was on the downstairs. There were restrooms there was a step going upstairs first, you saw on your right-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were restrooms. And there was a bar, a counter, more than a bar, a counter that was right in the middle of the downstairs floor. The downstairs was pretty big, the full width of the casino. Behind that, on a raised platform, was the bowling alley.
How many lanes?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Wow.
13, I believe.
That was big.
Uh-huh.
And did they have automatic pin setters back then, or did people have to set the pins?
Well, there were boys from Elizabeth City to come down and set the pins. So most of them hired from Elizabeth City.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, and they Ras Westcott that owned the casino had provided everything for them. They have a man that was a cook upstairs. They had bunks in the back in the upstairs, and for the boys to stay in. And fed them some good food. I was allowed to. I lived next door, but I could go in and eat with them before we started to work.
Yeah.
And a guy named colored cook named Moochie.
Yeah.
And he was a pretty nice guy, and he could cook like I've never seen before. It was delicious.
Yeah.
Everything he fixed for us was. So they had a pretty good job. They only had to work from about, I think they had to work at 7 o'clock until 11, whenever they quit serving beer. And after a while, it was 11 or 12 o'clock. They'd having to quit work. So they had a pretty good summer, those boys did.
Yeah. So the ground floor was mostly bowling alley, right?
Well, they had machines, too.
Like slot machines?
No gambling, just what would be a video machine today. They had more mechanical type machines that you could play, nickel, dime or something like that, and play the machine. It was either shooting at a bear that run around on a track and stand up, and you'd shoot him. That was my favorite one. And
right. So they called it a casino, but it doesn't sound like there was like serious gambling.
No gambling.
There was no gambling there.
Uh-uh.
They just called it a casino.
Well, now they did have fights upstairs when things in the off season, when things were kind of slow. Ras would have set up a boxing ring upstairs.
Is that right?
I'm talking about organized boxing.
Yeah.
And then get a boxer or two around there that was supposed to be pretty good, and have others come in and try to beat them or something like that. So boxing was a big thing back then, and it's not so much today.
No bear wrestling or anything like that?
What's that?
And no bear wrestling? Wrestling bears?
No, nothing like that. Just a couple of guys getting up there beating each other.
I have an old friend who used to wrestle bears. Is long story, but it's just kind of amusing. And it sounds like it would have been a perfect place to wrestle bears. They could have gone over to Dismal Swamp or something and gotten some bears over here.
Oh yeah, there's bears over there.
But so upstairs was more of a nightclub where the big bands played or something.
Yeah, when they didn't have the big bands playing, they had a jukebox going. Everybody got up and enjoyed themselves. It was a big dance floor.
Yeah.
And the band would be at one end on a stage, and at the other end was a bar.
Yeah.
And tables down each side by the windows. And the windows were just open holes with a shutter on them. They'd prop those open every night. And they was used for entertainment too. The windows were.
How so?
Occasionally, yeah. Fights would start that weren't organized, and it would seem to be commonplace that the whoever was fighting would eventually jump out the windows. Both of them get out there in the ground where they had some room, batter each other around for a little bit. Then I don't know what they did after that. After it got boring, we'd go back inside. And I don't know. A lot of people came just to watch the fights on Friday and Saturday nights.
That's hilarious. Oh my goodness.
And he had some good bands playing in there.
I heard. I mean, back when there was in the nation, there are these big traveling bands. Whether it was Glenn Miller or something like that, and these big bands would just travel around and come in and play.
Yeah, there was Fats Domino was there at one time.
Wow.
And I'm trying to think of the
Louis Armstrong?
Louis Armstrong.
Yeah,
Louis Armstrong. And the Scandinavian guy from Denmark, I believe, had a big band. All big bands. You'd get at least one a summer in there. And
all right.
Fats Domino was there. All of the black people that were servants at the cottages on down the beach, they still had their servants at that time.
Wow. Yeah.
They'd all line up outside. They weren't allowed in, but they'd line up outside when Fats Domino played.
Wow. They weren't allowed in.
No, they weren't allowed in then.
Yeah.
But they came in and listened to him play. Yeah, that was too bad. They should have let them all in. They would have crowded. They would have filled the place.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people down here, black people here, then in the summertime.
Right.
And it would have been interesting. I kind of felt sorry for them having to stand out there when they enjoyed him so much.
Yeah. So you're a kid. You're living in Nags Head. Tell me about Jockeys Ridge and driving around on Jockeys Ridge. And go ahead and give me the history of the name and stuff like that if you want to go into that.
The name of Jockeys Ridge?
Yeah.
Well, my grandmother told me one day that was not Jockeys Ridge, not originally Jockeys Ridge. She says it was originally called Engagement Hill.
Right.
And it was the tallest hill around, and it's the one that the tourists or the summer people that came in, the tourists and what have you, would take their girlfriend up to propose.
Right.
On a moonlit night, and got the name Engagement Hill.
Right.
Now, after all of this was going on, or sometime maybe during, another hill blew off from Jockeys Ridge and went down and covered up the hotel, and then continued to blow on by. And when I came along, it was behind my grandmother's beach house, the one on the beach, that is, that she had, not up in the woods, but the house that she had on the beach. And that's where I stayed when we came back from New York. And we played on what was now called Engagement Hill.
Okay.
And so the names got changed. Now, Jockeys Ridge ran from what is now Jockeys Ridge, ran north along the east side of the woods, and the sand piled up there and being blown over toward the woods and running out of the wind. When the wind hit the woods, it would change the direction and change the velocity and everything, and they would drop the sand there.
Yeah.
So that's where that ridge was built up, and it was a true ridge. It ran from the Soundside Road, Jockeys Ridge at the Soundside Road, clean up to the Collington Road.
Right.
Oh, something I didn't tell you. I found out that Collington had the first plantation in this country.
Is that right?
They tried to start one there, and it didn't go too well.
Right. And
just throw that in. That's
yeah.
just something I just discovered recently.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, let me deviate for just a second. You talked about coming across when you first came, when you were really young, and you came to the Outer Banks. I'm sorry, was there a bridge or a ferry up by the Wright Memorial Bridge? Is now?
Yeah, the bridge was put in here before I was born.
Okay. It was not the Wright Memorial Bridge at that time, though, correct?
Well, yes.
It was?
But it's privately owned. It was put in by real estate people that were wanting to get into real estate over here, and they were going to develop Southern Shores.
Yep.
They named the development Southern Shores. They were the ones that put the bridge in so that their prospective customers
clients
could come in there.
Yeah. And so when you came, so you come across the bridge, if anybody's done it before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You drive past Walmart and Food Lion, which obviously weren't here when you were a kid, and you kind of go up that hill, and you get up to the top of that hill, and tell me what you used to see when you got up to the top of that hill where the visitors center is.
Remember, you were going up a hill. You couldn't see the beach. You couldn't see the ocean. There was woods on both sides. You could see nothing. Kitty hawk on one side, duck on the other. When you go over at the top of that hill, you get the view of the ocean for miles and miles, and the beach on both sides. You look, there's nothing there but beach.
Yeah,
because it's spectacular.
Yeah, and just so anybody listening knows, back then there wasn't much foliage or trees once you got up over those woods, right?
No, there was hardly any trees at all on the beach.
Maybe just a little scrub brush or something. Mm-hmm. And there was no houses and no hotels and no other buildings. So when you got up to the top, you did have a panoramic view of everything up there.
Yes, I understand that a lot of people that read the advertisements for Southern Shores, on your place at the beach, would come up there and get the same view that I got of nothing there. They turn around and go back.
Right.
They weren't really looking for seclusion.
Right. It sounds good on paper, but when you live it, it's like, well,
yeah, it's different.
I kind of like having that store down the road.
Norris Austin, that lived up in Corolla, he'd been there since day one. His grandfather came over to run the lighthouse, caretaker of the lighthouse, and this was probably in the 70s or something. No, in the 60s.
Yeah.
This lady called him up and wanted to come down and rent one of his cottages.
Up in Corolla or something?
And he told her to take care of that.
Yep.
No problem at all. She said, well, now I'm looking for a place that's isolated. She says, I don't want these crowds around all the time. I want to get away from them. He said, well, this is isolated. This is before they had a road up there.
Right.
So she went in by boat, and he took her, got her set up in the house. She thought it was, a great spot.
Yeah.
Everything. She said, where can I buy a bathing suit? You're kidding. So this place is isolated.
You want it isolated, I got you isolated. Yeah, no Amazon to call and drop it off at your front door.
So I don't know what she did. There she was, stuck on the beach without a bathing suit.
Well, the crowds probably weren't that big. She could have wore whatever she wanted. Oh my goodness. Tell me about, now this is kind of funny when you consider how much they're protecting Jockeys Ridge, and as a matter of fact, they're protecting all the beaches from people driving on them, but you used to drive on Jockeys Ridge with your vehicle.
Yeah, I used to take my car up there. I took my uncle's car up there one day. He had big tires on his car. I had little ones. And there's a lot of difference. His would pull really well.
How old were you?
Up on there, yeah.
How old?
Huh?
How old were you?
Oh, I had my driver's license then. I didn't want to do anything illegal. Wasn't illegal back then. I had my driver's license, and he had big tires on a 1951 Plymouth, and the thing would pull pretty doggone good. And I went up there and I parked facing up the hill. I either parked facing up the hill or down the hill, one way or the other. So you turn side two and you can't get going. You'll start sliding down sideways and can't get grip to get turned around a lot of times. So I'd park facing either up the hill or down the hill. Well, I did this. Parked, put the car in gear, hold it, and turn the engine off, and got out, and the car started rolling back. So I jumped back in and put on the parking brake, made sure I had it in the right gear, got back out, and the thing started rolling back down again. So I stood there and watched it. It was moving real slow. I watched it, and the rear wheels weren't turning at all. The front ones, of course, were. And the car was so light and had such big tires on it that it just slid down the hill with the brakes on. I crawled back in, turned it sideways on the hill. I didn't have any trouble getting started in that one.
Oh, yeah.
But I had to leave my car up there one time. I went out playing around, and I got turned side two, and I couldn't get it out. And you can't call a tow truck. Wasn't anybody around to do that. You had to know somebody. And there wasn't anybody around that would help me get it out, so I wasn't worried about it anyway. I left it there and went on to work. And a day later, next day, people were coming in the service station where I was working. Said, "Did you know your car was up on the side of Jockeys Ridge?" I said, "Yeah." I told them what had happened. I left it there. Well, we had a pretty good blow, northeaster, and it blew all the sand out from under it, right down to where it was good, hard, packed sand. I got in and drove it away.
Excellent. And you used to take tourists up there?
I have, yes. I used to have a cut-down 32 Ford with big tires on it that it would get up the hill pretty good. And they'd see me up there, and they'd want to go for a ride, so I'd take them up. And one girl even came by. Well, this family came by, well-dressed. Nice looking, and that girl wanted to ride up on Jockeys Ridge. Her father asked for me. He was real protective of her. He asked if I would take her up. Could I do that? I said, "Well, sure, I can do it." So she got on the car with me. I didn't have any body on it. I just had a couple of seats rigged on it and a bed frame set up where the firewall should be to support the steering wheel.
Yeah.
And the pedals and everything back then were all in the floorboards. So we got on, and I took her up there for a ride. She thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Took her back down, and she gave her something to tell her friends when she got
right.
She rode up on top of the Jockeys
You'll never
Ridge.
believe this. Was the Jockeys Ridge so wide open that you could, maybe drive up and down a mile or two, north and south, or no?
No, it was one ridge right after the other. One hill right after the other.
Okay, I'm with you now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There were three. One in the middle between the two high ones. It was a little bit lower.
Yeah.
And the one on the east side, which was one everybody saw, and then the bigger hill was over on the west side. It was huge compared to the one on the east.
Yeah.
And I couldn't drive up the steep side, but I could go up the north side, which was usually a little bit less of an incline.
Yeah, more gradual.
And go up there, and then I'd ride down some of the steeper sides. But I never did mess around on the very steep part where it was about 45 degrees. I just didn't want to do it. People from Virginia would do that later on. When they started coming down, they rigged up cars that would climb up the steep side.
Yeah.
And with enough speed, they'd go up it, and then they'd ride back down the steep side. But I didn't want to waste my car. Oh, I did bend my car though up.
You bent it.
Yes, I carried three people up there on it one time. One of them was my cousin, and he wasn't too big, but the other two guys were good size.
Yeah.
and no body on it or anything like that to support the thing. I went down one hill just as hard as I could go, showing off, and hit the bottom and up the other side and pulling so many G's that with all that weight on there, the chassis bent right down, almost dragging the ground.
Oh my gosh! Now, is this so you're basically just driving an open chassis car around? Was this your daily driver, or did you have another car?
Well, no, I didn't always drive it. I had other cars up there too.
Yeah.
And what was your question?
I just wondered, was it so loosey-goosey that you just drove this thing around town quite often, or it was just kind of a fun car you used for...
No, I drove it around town, but I didn't have the body off of it that long before I bent the frame, and then I had to get that fixed. And
okay.
I don't know whatever happened to the car. I think my uncle gave it away when I went to Florida and left it in the yard.
Yeah. But you had your motorcycle.
Yeah, I had those later on.
Yeah.
Well, I had a little motorbike, is what I called it. It was actually done up. It was a whizzer, and everybody knows that whizzers were bicycles with a motor on them.
Okay.
This one wasn't. It was made by a whizzer, but it had a motor and a kickstart. Didn't have any pedals on it, so it wasn't a bicycle.
Okay.
And I used to ride it around there on the beach when I was 14. I had it 14, 15, 16 till I got a car. I rode it over to Mandio one time, and the police chief over there, Mitchell, caught me, saw me, told me to get that thing back to Nags Head, and said, "Don't come back over here again." So I went back. I didn't go back to Mandio on it.
Yeah, no need to look for trouble.
No, no, I didn't look for trouble.
And the police rarely came over on this side, right?
Well, now at the casino,
yeah.
they had the police there. They had the shore patrol there at times, so they watched that place pretty closely.
Right.
But so far as a patrolman around, we had one highway patrolman that covered state highway patrolman that covered a large area, and he'd come through every once in a while. Everybody knew his name. It was Officer Holt. And
I can't believe you remember these names, but that's great.
I don't know how I remember some things because I got a terrible memory. At least I think
I'm
I
not
do.
seeing it. Okay, so, all right. I think that kind of wraps up, your childhood days on the Outer Banks, and just great stories, great history there. But you have some other information about, let's see. Tell me about your definition of the Outer Banks. What are the Outer Banks for you?
Well, the Outer Banks to me starts in Virginia, just north of the state line, and it runs all the way down past Hatteras, past Ocracoke, which is the end of the Outer Banks nowadays.
Right.
And Portsmouth Island, and further continued on down is Portsmouth Island and Core Banks, Shackelford Banks. And some people recognize that part as being the Outer Banks.
Right.
But back...
We're talking, just to give everybody an idea, we're talking down by Beaufort and Morehead City?
Yeah, then if you go on down, there's Beaufort. Not Beaufort, but Atlantic Beach.
Right.
Right across the bay or the sound, Bogue Sound from Morehead City.
Right.
And that continues on down to the county line, which is down near Swansboro.
Yep.
And it's called the Bogue Banks. And I think what had happened is that the Bogue Banks built up from the town of Morehead City and Atlantic Beach over on the other side on the Core Banks. On Bogue Banks. It built up over there and became a very populated area. So that tends to make people think that is not part of the Outer Banks.
Right.
The Outer Banks starts right across the Beaufort Inlet at Core Banks and runs north. Nowadays, that's everybody gets their historic information from the realtors.
Yeah.
Ocracoke is the
right.
Is the last town going south.
Right. They'll spin it. They'll spin it anyway.
That's the limit of the Outer Banks there.
Yeah. And you gave me a quick lesson on kind of the
the original settlers of Nags Head Woods, and the Nags Head Woods community was kind of the heart and soul of this North Outer Banks area. I mean, I'm sure there was other communities, but that was a pretty important part of this.
No, Nags Head really wasn't important.
No?
Back then, it was just where the people lived, and it was one of the smaller communities.
Was it? Okay.
Collington Island was larger, and Kitty Hawk was more, I guess you'd call it larger.
Yeah.
It was closer to civilization anyway. The rest of us were kind of isolated.
Yeah, it makes sense. But you told me, so I probably misspoke there, but you were telling me about kind of a three-pronged, community in Nags Head Woods. Go ahead and tell me about.
The three distinct groups of people besides the Nags Head Woods people, the natives that stayed here year-round.
Right.
There was also the Elizabeth City people that came down and started the businesses. They were second. They would run a boat down to Elizabeth City, and they had their homes. So not a home, but a cottage that they start with that they spend the summers in, and then the plantation owners discovered it in about 1830s, I think. That's when people really started discovering the place, was in 1830s. And they were building places over here on the Sound Shore. And from what I understand, there's a lot of different histories on it, but it seems that everybody stayed on the Sound Shore at first and would walk across to the beach.
Yeah.
Because the beach was getting to be a big thing, which it never had been before that anywhere in the world that I know of.
Is that right?
It's spending time on the beach. Well, they'd walk across, and the first house was built by a doctor from Elizabeth City, Dr. Poole, built one in 1855.
Wow.
And from there, the planters started building their beach cottages over there, and they ended up building from about Jockeys Ridge all the way down to Edward Outlaw's cottage, which is where the Cavalier Surf Shop is now.
Yeah.
Right across the street. And that was where they just about all of them settled, was right in there. Now, when they come down to settle, they'd buy land from the Sound to the ocean. Some of them did anyway.
Right.
I'm trying to think. I think it was Nixon that bought the first piece of property, the notable piece anyway.
Not the president, but just the family called Nixon from.
No, it was by golly, it was Dr. Poole, I believe, and that's right. He was the one that built the first house over there, and he got lonesome over there in the summertime. Wasn't anybody there, so he started selling his land off for a little bit of nothing, pennies per. He bought it for pennies per acre anyway.
Wow.
So he was selling it off at cost to anybody that wanted to move over there in the summertime. And then they ended up subdividing, of course, then, and making smaller plots.
Yeah.
But some of them from the Sound side, from the pier south, was pretty much all taken up by the cottagers, the plantation owners.
Okay.
And a strip along the ocean, and some of them would go from the ocean to Sound, but I don't think most of those did. I think they were smaller pieces of property.
Right.
Those Nags Head had already developed on the Sound side, which was right opposite those buildings.
Right.
But anyway, it was those three groups of people that were here.
And there was a little animosity.
Sir?
Animosity amongst those groups?
Not really.
No? Okay.
Isolated each other.
Okay.
One of them, the ones in the woods, didn't have too much to do with the people on the beach.
Right.
And people on the beach didn't have too much to do with us. But there were some pretty good, decent people there. Outlaw, I got a lot of information from Outlaw, E.R. Outlaw Jr. He's got a little pamphlet. It's kind of hard to read and put it all together. He skips around. He wrote it as a letter to his children to let him know what life was like when he was growing up on the beach.
Yeah.
Because he was one of the first to spend, not the first, but he was one of the first to spend the entire year down here, and he got used to it. He stayed here.
Okay.
I remember seeing him. I never did talk to him. I wish I'd have seen him, but I was 19. He died in 1954,
Okay.
and I remember I remember he had a Jeep that drove on the beach that he would bring down at that time and stay in the cottage, his father's cottage, I believe, and he coated it with linseed oil and turpentine, so he do wood on a boat back then, and it kept it from rusting.
Yeah.
Turned it black, but it kept it from rusting.
That's amazing. Yeah, my father-in-law lives up in Vermont, and there's a way you can oil a car up in Vermont to prevent it from rusting. Basically,
Oh, really?
you oil it from kind of the inside out, so that you could drive it around all winter without worrying about it rusting up on you. Very
That's
funny.
okay. So somebody else knew about that.
Yep,
too.
same technology, just kind of passed around a little bit.
Yeah.
Same idea. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay. Anything else you want to share about that? Was there anything else on your list you wanted to share about the Outer Banks or Nags Head Woods or anything like that, or the history?
Nothing I can think about. I got other things. You want to stay a couple more hours?
We're going to save. We might have to save something for our next session.
Oh yeah. One thing I didn't mention today is the plantation in Collington.
Yeah.
The very first plantation in this country was started in Collington.
And what do you think they were farming? Do you think was it cotton or something, or?
No, I have forgotten. It was not tobacco, which was a big crop, and it wasn't cotton, which was a big crop.
Yeah.
I've forgotten now what the.
And do you think it was one owner, one plantation out there?
Well, it was Carteret, which Carteret County is named after him, and he was one of the Lord's proprietors.
Okay.
And that's when the plantation was started in the 1660s, when the Lord's proprietors were set up and given 8 of them, I believe, and given property over here that reached, I don't know, it's probably like Carolina was considered from here into the Pacific Ocean or,
Yeah.
or wherever, So I guess that they were given that much land in North Carolina and South Carolina too. I don't know, in the Carolinas anyway. And he was one of them, and he ended up with Collington Island, and I was trying to think how they got the name Collington. It was a man named Collett that maybe ended up with the land from Carteret. Carteret probably granted it to him, and he started a plantation there. I don't know what they grew, but they had to import workers to come in here. And I've always wondered whether the Beasleys were related to the people that came over in the 1630s, because there's Beasleys all over the place, and there's still a lot of them in Collington, on Collington Island.
Is that right?
Why, anyhow, that was the first.
Do you think they had
plantation.
slaves?
Sir?
Do you think that plantation had slaves?
Say again?
Slaves? Do you think they had slaves at the plantation?
That was early. I don't know whether the slaves had come over by then or not.
Gotcha. Just curious.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
They had indentured servants that would come over.
Right.
And they'd have, I guess they come over to work the place.
Brought with them from England or something.
Mm-hmm. And then they worked their time out, which was usually around 7 years.
Oh, was it?
And then they were free to do what they wanted to.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, I have read some articles on Collington, and yeah, I know, I seem to recall that they tried to use it for manufacturing goods or something like that, but I need to find that article and catch myself up with that. That could be a whole big discussion on that too. So
yeah, there's nothing on that I know of. I just ran across that somewhere.
Okay.
And you don't hear about it in history books or anything. It just seems to be ignored.
Yeah, that's kind of a big deal. That's an interesting point that should be brought
Should be checked into.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't go because the plantation wouldn't work on Collington Island. It wouldn't grow anything.
I can see that.
So until it'll grow tourist. It is now.
You just sprinkle some water on them and they just come out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's now called Collington Harbor.
Well, I tell you what, I think we've probably hit a good time here. We've been talking for 90 minutes, which is great. I enjoy the talk. I hope to bring you back again. We can think of another topic, maybe, we could talk about your water sports business and being a captain and all that stuff would be really interesting. But I think this was a great 90 minutes.
I don't think anybody would be interested in what I did. I never had I was an aircraft mechanic. I did good at that, and I did a lot of things that I just fell into.
Yeah.
And enjoyed it, captain.
Yeah.
I managed to work on a schooner for a while, working out of Manteo yet.
Is that right?
And got enough time on that I ended up getting a tonnage license from the Coast Guard so that I could run a dolphin tour boat, which I did for a while.
Right.
But that wasn't my thing really. So
right.
I went down as far as Honduras and over in the
Wow.
Bahamas on that freighter.
Wow.
On a different, he traded that, got a freighter, and
Yeah.
so that was fun. That was the interesting part, but I fell into it.
Yeah. Those are the best jobs.
Yeah, it was great. It was a good sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of foolish to do it, but the crew was even foolisher, so I didn't do it.
Who's the biggest fool here? Yeah, I think I've had a few jobs like that. But, well, I tell you what, the name of the podcast is called Treasures of the Outer Banks, and I think we've definitely got a treasure in you, Wykie. I appreciate you sharing that history of the Outer Banks, and I appreciate you being on the show.
Well, I enjoyed it too. You're the first person that I've been able to talk to about it.
All right.
Really great.
All right, mark the date. Thanks a lot. I'd like to thank Wikey Wise for meeting me down at Kitty Hawk Water Sports so we could talk about some of the things he grew up with. I think that was an amazing talk, and I have to bring him back and ask him more things. I'm already putting together a list of other topics that we can talk about, or maybe we can drill down a little bit more on some of the things that we spoke about today. Anyway, I appreciate you listening to the episode. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I hope you enjoyed these stories. I think the Outer Banks is a special place, and sharing it with other people who love the Outer Banks is a real privilege for me. If you have a specific topic you'd like to hear or a specific person, please leave a note in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Remember, if you want to find treasure on the Outer Banks, just talk to a local.